Stopped counting the days lost in the rhythm.
The committee's final recommendations could include additional charges proposed for Trump, according to the source. The referral recommendations will be presented at a committee meeting on Monday, and the final report will provide justification from the panel's investigation for recommending the charges. The impact House referrals could have remains unclear because the Department of Justice Special Counsel investigation is already examining Trump in its extensive probe into January 6. But in addition to criminal referrals, Committee Chairman Benny Thompson told reporters that the panel could issue 5 to 6 other categories of referrals, such as ethics referrals to the House Ethics Committee, bar discipline referrals, and campaign finance referrals. A judge had agreed with the House, finding it could access Eastman's emails about his 2020 election work for Trump because the pair was likely planning to defraud the U.S. and engaging in a conspiracy to obstruct Congress, according to that court proceeding. Stephen Chung, a spokesman for Trump, criticized the committee in a statement as a kangaroo court that held show trials by never Trump partisans who are a stain on this country's history. Representative Zoe Lofgren, a member of the committee, told CNN's Jake Tapper Friday that the panel has been very careful in crafting these recommendations and tethering them to the facts that we've uncovered. We spent a huge amount of time not just on what the code sections are and the bottom line recommendation, but the facts, and I think it's really important when we discuss whatever it is we are going to do and we'll have a vote on it, that people understand the facts behind the conclusions we reach, the California Democrats said on The Lead. The Justice Department has largely focused on criminal statutes related to the violence, for obstructing a congressional proceeding, and in some limited cases for seditious conspiracy, when charging defendants in connection with the attack on the U.S. Capitol. The committee will hold its final public meeting on Monday, and the panel's full report will be released Wednesday, according to Thompson. The Mississippi Democrats said the panel will approve its final report Monday and make announcements about criminal referrals to the Justice Department. But the public will not see the final report until 2 days later. Another source cautioned at the time that while names were being considered, there was still discussion to be had before names were finalized. This story has been updated with additional developments. This story has been corrected to reflect that The Guardian first reported on consideration of the charges.
New COVID model predicts over 1 million deaths in China through 2023. According to the group's projections, cases in China would peak around April 1st, when deaths would reach 322,000. About a third of China's population will have been infected by then, IHME Director Christopher Murray said. China's National Health Authority has not reported any official COVID deaths since the lifting of COVID restrictions. The last official deaths were reported on December 3rd. Total pandemic fatalities stand at 5,235. China lifted some of the world's toughest COVID restrictions in December after unprecedented public protests and is now experiencing a spike in infections, with fears COVID could sweep across its 1.4 billion population during next month's Lunar New Year holiday. Nobody thought they would stick to zero COVID as long as they did, Murray said on Friday when the IHME projections were released online. China's zero-COVID policy may have been effective at keeping earlier variants of the virus at bay. But the high transmissibility of Omicron variants made it impossible to sustain, he said. The independent modeling group at the University of Washington in Seattle, which has been relied on by governments and companies throughout the pandemic, drew on provincial data and information from a recent Omicron outbreak in Hong Kong. China has since the original Wuhan outbreak barely reported any deaths. That is why we look to Hong Kong to get an idea of the infection fatality rate, Murray said. For its forecasts, IHME also uses information on vaccination rates provided by the Chinese government as well as assumptions on how various provinces will respond as infection rates increase. Other experts expect some 60% of China's population will eventually be infected, with a peak expected in January, hitting vulnerable populations, such as the elderly and those with pre-existing conditions, the hardest. Key concerns include China's large pool of susceptible individuals, the use of less effective vaccines, and low vaccine coverage among those 80 and older, who are at greatest risk of severe disease. Based on China's population of 1.41 billion, and without measures such as a mass vaccination booster campaign, that amounts to 964,400 deaths. Yinzhong Huang, a senior fellow for global health at the Council on Foreign Relations, said there are 164 million people in China with diabetes, a risk factor for poor COVID outcomes. There are also 8 million people aged 80 and older who have never been vaccinated. Chinese officials are now encouraging individuals to get boosted from a list of newer Chinese-made shots. However, the government is still reluctant to use foreign vaccines, Huang said. China's National Health Commission said on Friday it was ramping up vaccinations and building stocks of ventilators and essential drugs.
Elon Musk's Twitter suspension of journalists draws global backlash. In a 24-hour poll later by Musk on Twitter on whether to restore the journalists' accounts, 58.7% votes were in favor of restoring them immediately. The accounts were still suspended approximately 15 minutes after the poll closed, a check by Reuters showed. Twitter did not immediately respond to a Reuters request for comment. The suspensions on Thursday evening drew criticism from government officials, advocacy groups and journalism organizations in several parts of the world, with some saying the microblogging platform was jeopardizing press freedom. The episode, which one well-known security researcher labeled the Thursday Night Massacre, is being regarded by critics as fresh evidence of the billionaire, who considers himself a free speech absolutist, eliminating speech and users he personally dislikes. Roland Lescure, the French Minister of Industry, tweeted on Friday that, following Musk's suspension of journalists, he would suspend his own activity on Twitter. Melissa Fleming, head of communications for the United Nations, tweeted she was deeply disturbed by the suspensions and that media freedom is not a toy. The German Foreign Office warned Twitter that the ministry had a problem with moves that jeopardized press freedom. The suspension stemmed from a disagreement over a Twitter account called Elon Jet, which tracked Musk's private plane using publicly available information. On Wednesday, Twitter suspended the account and others that tracked private jets, despite Musk's previous tweets saying he would not suspend Elon Jet in the name of free speech. Shortly after, Twitter changed its privacy policy to prohibit the sharing of live location information. Then on Thursday evening, several journalists, including from the New York Times, CNN and The Washington Post, were suspended from Twitter with no notice. In an email to Reuters overnight, Twitter's head of trust and safety, Ella Irwin, said the team manually reviewed any and all accounts that violated the new privacy policy by posting direct links to the Elon Jet account. I understand that the focus seems to be mainly on journalist accounts, but we applied the policy equally to journalists and non-journalist accounts today, Irwin said in the email. The Society for Advancing Business Editing and Writing said in a statement on Friday that Twitter's actions violate the spirit of the First Amendment and the principle that social media platforms will allow the unfiltered distribution of information that is already in the public square. Musk accused the journalists of posting his real-time location, which is basically assassination coordinates, for his family. The billionaire appeared briefly in a Twitter Spaces audio chat hosted by journalists, which quickly turned into a contentious discussion about whether the suspended reporters had actually exposed Musk's real-time location in violation of the policy. "If you dox, you get suspended. End of story," Musk said repeatedly in response to questions. Dox is a term for publishing private information about someone, usually with malicious intent. The Washington Post's Drew Harwell, one of the journalists who had been suspended but was nonetheless able to join the audio chat, pushed back against the notion that he had exposed Musk or his family's exact location by posting a link to Elon Jet. Soon after, BuzzFeed reporter Katie Natopoulos, who hosted the Spaces chat, tweeted that the audio session was cut off abruptly and the recording was not available. In a tweet explaining what happened, Musk said, "We're fixing a legacy bug. Should be working tomorrow."